My name is Jenny, and I had a plan. A plan that began to take shape deep in my mind, like a seed planted in the fertile soil of grievances and disappointments. But before I tell you how it all started, I need to go back to the time when everything seemed perfect. Cameron, my husband, and I met at work. I was his boss, and honestly, he didn't make much of an impression on me at first. He was a little unsure of himself, seemed lost, but at the same time, he was genuine and friendly. He was assigned to my department, and I was tasked with training him in the basics of the job. In the early days, he was often nervous. His voice would tremble when he asked questions, but over time, everything changed. We grew closer gradually. One day, he asked me outside the office, "Jenny, are you free next weekend?" The question caught me off guard, but at the same time, it filled me with excitement. In that moment, I noticed how much more confident he had become away from the strict corporate setting. His confidence and ease captivated me. After that invitation, we started spending more and more time together. 3 months later, he asked me another, even more significant question, "Jenny, will you be my girlfriend?" I agreed, and our relationship quickly blossomed. Cameron not only improved at his job but also gained recognition from his colleagues and superiors. When he was transferred to another department, he proposed to me, "Jenny, will you marry me?" I was overjoyed, and my parents and younger sister Lauren immediately approved of our union. Lauren, who was Cameron's age, quickly bonded with him. She often told me, "You're so lucky to have Cameron, Jenny. He's so kind and caring." Her words made me proud of our marriage, although later, I began to notice a hint of envy in her tone. After her breakup with her boyfriend, Lauren seemed to look for someone to look up to, and at times, her jealousy of my marriage became apparent. After the wedding, I continued working, keeping our home in order, and supporting Cameron. I always tried to be his rock, especially in his professional life. But a year after our marriage, something changed. Cameron started coming home later and later, and our evenings together became increasingly rare. When I asked him what was going on, he would just give a brief reply, "Everything's fine." But I could see how my questions about work irritated him. Realizing that we needed more time together, I suggested a spa getaway to take a break from the daily grind. I even booked a room and eagerly anticipated the trip. But a week before the vacation, Cameron told me he had to leave for work. "Work, nothing I can do about it," he said. His words sounded indifferent, as if our relationship had become secondary to him. I tried to ignore his frequent trips and late nights at work, but it became harder every day to dismiss the feeling that something was wrong between us. Cameron withdrew more and more, and our conversations grew increasingly superficial. Instead of seeking closeness, it felt like he was building a wall, separating himself from me. It felt like I was doing everything possible to support our marriage. I took care of him, tried to create a cozy home, and even helped him with work when he asked. But instead of gratitude, I was met with coldness. My patience began to wear thin. One evening, while Cameron was late again, I heard the phone ring. It was Lauren. Her voice sounded anxious as she asked me to come over, saying she needed to talk about something important. I set aside what I was doing and headed to my sister's place, unaware that this conversation would change my life. Lauren greeted me at the door of her apartment with a nervous smile. We sat down at the table, and she began speaking, avoiding my eyes. "Jenny, I don't know how to say this. But I think Cameron, he's not who he seems to be," she started, choosing her words carefully. Her statement stunned me. I didn't know how to respond, but something stirred inside me. What if she was right? I returned home that night with a heavy heart, overwhelmed by doubt. I knew I had to get to the truth. From that moment, my thoughts began to take shape into a plan. A plan that I believed would help me deal with whatever was destroying our marriage. Cameron left early the next morning, having packed his things the night before. His gaze was as cold as ever, and even the ritual, "take care," sounded dry and detached. If things had gone differently, we would have been heading to the spa together, I thought, feeling the familiar wave of sadness. Still, I resolved not to waste the day and planned to do something for myself. My thoughts were interrupted by a phone call. On the other end was the hotel manager, apologizing for not receiving my cancellation notice and asking to confirm the time of our arrival. At first, I was going to decline, but suddenly I decided, why not? This could be a rare chance to distract myself. I called my parents to invite Lauren, but my mother told me that Lauren had left the house that morning and hadn't returned yet. Feeling slightly uneasy, I offered the trip to my mother instead. Really? You want me to come with you? She asked in surprise, her voice warm. Of course. You deserve some rest, Mom, I replied, happy that she agreed. We packed quickly and, within hours, were on our way to the hotel. The drive was peaceful, and we talked about everything, nothing, something we hadn't done in a long time. But what was supposed to be a getaway soon turned into a nightmare. As we arrived at the hotel and headed to the reception desk, I suddenly noticed a familiar figure. It was Cameron. He was walking arm in arm with a woman who was laughing, clearly enjoying the moment. My heart clenched in my chest. For a moment, I thought it was just a coincidence, until I saw her face. It was Lauren. My sister. They didn't notice us and continued on their way, heading to the very hotel where our trip was supposed to take place. I stood there, as if struck by lightning, unable to move. Jenny, that's, Mom began, but fell silent, apparently not knowing how to finish her sentence. I turned away from the sight, trying to steady my breathing. We returned home in silence, and as I wrapped myself in a blanket on the couch, I felt my emotions boiling inside me, ready to erupt. Cameron's betrayal was painful, but seeing Lauren with him, that was unbearable. The next morning, as soon as I felt more composed, I started taking action. I called Cameron's department to confirm his business trip. My conversation with his secretary confirmed my worst fears. There had been no business trip. We try to minimize such trips, she explained. Recently, we haven't had any need to send anyone out of the office. Piecing together memories of the nights when Cameron came home late, and those same days when Lauren was absent from home, I realized the truth. They had been seeing each other. Behind my back, right in front of me, using every opportunity they could find. Instead of tears and despair, anger began to grow inside me. I couldn't sit idly by any longer. Mom, I'm divorcing him, I said, pushing away my cup of tea. I don't want to see Lauren, so I won't be coming to the house for a while. I hope you understand. She didn't reply, but her eyes, filled with sympathy, said more than words ever could. The next day, I got to work. A lawyer helped me draft the divorce papers. I signed a new lease and packed my belongings. The apartment I moved into was a temporary refuge until I found a place that could truly become my new home. When everything was ready, I left the documents and a letter for Cameron on the kitchen table. In the letter, I explained everything, that I knew, that I would no longer tolerate it, and that any further communication would be handled through my lawyer. After that, I blocked his number so I would never have to hear his voice again. Now, sitting in my new apartment, I felt free for the first time in a long while. Yes, the wounds from the betrayal wouldn't heal quickly, but I knew I had taken the first step toward a life where I belonged to myself. I didn't want Lauren or Cameron to know my new address. My new life had to remain out of their reach, like a boundary I built around myself to protect what little was left of my faith in those closest to me. I didn't even tell my parents where I lived, to ensure no accidental paths would lead them to my quiet sanctuary. Cameron and I continued to work at the same company, which occasionally caused our paths to cross. Each time I saw him in the hallway or the common areas, I ignored his presence as if he were nothing more than a shadow of the past, unworthy of my attention. Cameron quickly agreed to the divorce, which indicated that he wasn't interested in fighting for what we had, or perhaps he understood it was pointless. He never discussed the reasons for our separation, neither with colleagues nor with family. Years passed, and I managed to maintain my distance from both Cameron and my family. 5 years slipped by like sand through my fingers. One evening, after returning home from a long day, I found my mother standing at my door. Her face looked anxious, yet filled with something I couldn't immediately decipher. "Mom, what's going on?" I asked, letting her inside. She handed me an invitation, her hands trembling. "It's from Cameron and Lauren," she said quietly. My fingers froze as I held the thick card. It was adorned with elegant gold embossing and a message that felt almost mocking. "Cameron and Lauren invite you to their wedding ceremony." "Lauren has moved in with him," Mom continued. "They live together now. I thought they might get married, but I didn't expect them to invite us to the wedding." Her words hit me like a cold wind. I said nothing, my throat tightening with anger and pain. "Are you going?" I asked, trying to mask my emotions. Mom shook her head. "No. I haven't forgiven them. I know I should, but I just can't." Her words surprised me. I had always thought of my mother as someone who put family above everything, even her own feelings. "I won't go, Jenny," she said firmly. "Just wait and see what happens." On the day of the wedding, I tried not to think about what was happening. But when my phone rang, I saw it was Mom calling. "Mom, I don't want to see them," I said, feeling anger rise in my chest. "Please don't hang up. You need to see this," she said insistently. I sighed and kept the call going. On the screen, I saw the wedding. Guests, laughter, and the hostess smiling as she began her introduction. "We've prepared a surprise for you," the hostess announced. A slideshow created by the bride's mother to tell the story of her life. My heart stopped. "Mom? It can't be," I thought, trying to process how she could have been involved in something like this. But to my astonishment, the slideshow didn't start with pictures of Lauren. It began with pictures of me. The first photo was taken in the maternity ward, where I was lying wrapped in a soft blanket. Then came pictures from my childhood, my first day at school, dance performances, family picnics. The guests began whispering, and Lauren's face tensed. "Wait, this isn't the right presentation," she cried out, but the hostess paid no attention. The slideshow continued, narrating my story, my achievements, my work, my efforts. "She has always been devoted to her family," the hostess said, as if reading my mind. The room was filled with a strange tension. I sat in my room, staring at the screen, unable to decide how to feel. Inside me, joy over finally being acknowledged for my efforts clashed with anger at my mother for doing it this way. Lauren appeared to be trying to stop the presentation, but the guests had already begun piecing things together. Cameron, standing next to her, looked tense and confused, as if he realized what was happening. I turned off my phone, unwilling to watch how it would end. But something shifted in that moment. For the first time in a long while, I felt that justice, small as it might be, had been served. The hall plunged into uneasy silence, broken only by the murmurs of guests discussing what had just occurred. What had started as a heartfelt presentation had turned into an exposé, calling not only Lauren and Cameron's relationship into question but the very wedding itself. On the screen, photo after photo from my life appeared, each one stirring more confusion among the crowd. When the photos from my wedding with Cameron came up, the hostess froze. She stopped speaking, realizing something was amiss. Before she could respond, my mother stepped onto the stage. She confidently took the microphone, her face a mix of determination and anger. "From this point forward, I'll take responsibility for explaining," she declared, not allowing Cameron or Lauren the chance to interrupt. She continued advancing the slides, recounting the story of my marriage. The guests were presented with an image of me not only as a caring wife who supported her husband but also as a devoted sister who had always tried to do everything for her family. After the wedding, my daughter always supported Cameron, both in his personal and professional life. She even planned a spa trip for him to help him cope with stress. My mother continued, looking directly at Lauren and Cameron, whose faces were growing paler by the second. The screen displayed a photo taken on the very day I had accidentally run into Cameron and Lauren at the spa. The guests gasped, and the murmuring turned into a loud commotion. Lauren, visibly losing her composure, jumped up and tried to approach my mother, but her words were drowned out by the noise. But Cameron declined the trip, claiming he had a business trip, my mother remarked bitterly. In the end, my daughter invited me instead, and it was then that we saw their affair. Those words triggered an uproar in the hall. Guests exchanged glances, some clearly struggling to decide how to react, while others openly expressed disapproval. Cameron and Lauren stood frozen in place, like animals caught in a trap. "That's not true," Lauren shouted, her voice trembling with tension. "Mom, stop it, this is my wedding." "Your wedding?" my mother repeated, giving her a cold, piercing look. "Lauren, you destroyed your sister's happiness out of pure selfishness. Did you ever consider how deeply you hurt her?" "But she was always so happy," Lauren cried. "Always the center of attention. It's not fair." My mother stared at her with such icy disdain that it seemed as though time had stopped in the hall. "Instead of celebrating your family's joy, you chose jealousy," she replied. "Can't you just celebrate our new beginning?" Cameron interjected, his voice pleading. "Why are you doing this today?" "A new beginning," my mother scoffed bitterly. "You want to start a new life with Lauren, but you couldn't even end the old one with dignity." The guests were stunned. My mother turned to address everyone in the hall. "If you truly want to know the truth, here it is. Cameron vowed to care for Jenny, but he betrayed her with her own sister. I couldn't stay silent knowing how unjust this is to my daughter." Cameron lowered his head, unable to respond. Lauren looked furious and humiliated. "Mom, please, stop," Lauren pleaded, her voice shaking as tears streamed down her face. "No, Lauren," my mother said firmly. "I always wanted you to be happy, but I never thought you'd build your happiness on someone else's pain." At that moment, it seemed Cameron had lost whatever patience he had left. "Let's just end this," he muttered, but his words were swallowed by the rising commotion in the hall. The slideshow continued flickering on the screen until the hostess finally managed to turn it off. The events had turned the wedding into chaos, and all I could do was sit in my room and listen to fragments of what was happening through the phone. Mom ended her speech briefly and decisively. "I didn't come here to ruin a celebration. But perhaps this celebration should have been reconsidered before it even began." With that, the connection ended, leaving me alone with my thoughts about what Mom had done for me. The conference room was brightly lit, the light reflecting off the screen where Cameron's presentation was set to begin in just a minute. The atmosphere was professional, slightly tense, as is often the case at major events. I sat in the back row, hidden in the shadows, watching the proceedings like a spectator preparing to witness a play they themselves had orchestrated. When Cameron entered the room, his face exuded confidence, as though the past years had erased all traces of his mistakes. He walked toward the stage with a slight smile, nodding at colleagues and clearly relishing the attention. His supervisor, standing at the microphone, stopped him briefly before the presentation began. "Today, ladies and gentlemen, is a special day," he began, addressing the audience. "Our colleague Cameron has recently gotten married, which no doubt gives him even greater motivation to reach new heights." The room erupted in applause, and Cameron seemed to savor every moment of it. "Yes, I will do everything I can for my family," he declared with a smile that might have seemed genuine if I didn't know the truth. I watched with growing determination. The room buzzed with excitement, people were captivated, eagerly awaiting Cameron's presentation. He was the center of attention, like the hero of the day. But I knew this moment wouldn't last. As he began his presentation, I quietly took out my phone and connected it to the room's sound system. In my hands was a recording of a conversation Mom had sent me after the wedding. Her voice, filled with anger and resolve, soon echoed through the room, drowning out Cameron's words. "After everything you've done, do you really think you can just start over? Do you believe our wounds heal in 5 years? Do you think betrayal can be left in the past as if it never happened?" Mom's voice hit like a thunderclap. The buzz in the room instantly gave way to dead silence. Cameron froze, his expression shifting dramatically. He glanced toward the audio equipment, as if trying to understand what was happening. At that moment, the recording continued. My mother's voice laid everything bare: the infidelity, the lies, the betrayal. Then came the sound of her words spoken at the wedding. "Cameron, you destroyed my daughter's life, and now you hope it can all just be forgotten?" The expressions on the faces of those in the room began to shift, from surprise to judgment. Someone murmured something under their breath, and then another voice, louder, asked a question. "Cameron, you said the divorce was due to a difference in values. What do you have to say now?" I couldn't hold it in anymore and laughed. The laughter erupted from me like a volcano that had been dormant for years. All heads turned toward me. I stood and slowly walked forward. "Difference in values, Cameron?" I said, trying to keep my voice steady, though I felt the anger boiling inside me. "Did you really say something like that? I wonder, does betrayal with your wife's sister fall under your values?" The room buzzed with tension and shock. Cameron tried to speak, but his voice was drowned out by the noise. I raised my hand, calling for silence. "I apologize for bringing personal matters into this presentation," I said, barely suppressing the sarcasm. "But I can't stay silent anymore. I endured all of this for the sake of working at a company I love, but I can't remain where I have to work alongside a man who destroyed my life." I turned to the leadership and my colleagues. "Today, I'm resigning." My resolve was firm, but before I could take a step toward the exit, voices from the board of directors rang out. "Hold on a minute, Jenny," said one of them, rising from their seat. "You're a vital employee, one of our key assets. If anyone should leave, it's Cameron." The words were so unexpected that I froze. I hadn't anticipated such a response, but I could see understanding in their eyes. My revelation had changed everything. "We'll address this," another board member added. "Jenny, please stay. We don't want to lose you." Cameron stood there, pale, trying to say something, but no one cared anymore. Colleagues began openly condemning him, the murmurs turning into loud accusations. I stood there, watching as what once seemed unshakable crumbled right before my eyes. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I had taken my revenge. Cameron, despite the evident damage to his reputation, tried to maintain some semblance of dignity. During one meeting discussing the fallout from his mistakes, he put forth an argument that sounded more like an excuse. "We all face challenges. Yes, more was expected of me in the past, but times change. Maybe now you see me differently because I've lost the shine I once had. But that doesn't mean I've stopped being a valuable employee." His words were met with quiet disbelief among those present. Even the most neutral colleagues couldn't hide their skepticism. His attempts to justify his behavior seemed pitiful against the backdrop of the widespread rumors about his affair with his wife's sister, which had spread throughout the company. Meanwhile, Lauren, who had always been known for her laziness and inability to handle everyday responsibilities, fully embraced the role of a housewife. Her comfortable little world, built on Cameron's money, began to collapse when he was demoted. Now earning less and working in a remote area, he could no longer support the lifestyle Lauren had grown accustomed to. When she realized the reality of their situation, her decision was swift and cynical. She left Cameron, convinced she could easily find a replacement. Lauren moved in with a new man who, she believed, could provide her with the carefree life she desired. However, her plans quickly fell apart. Her new partner turned out to be unemployed, unambitious, and reliant on her for support. Now, Lauren was struggling to keep afloat. She took on 2 exhausting jobs to pay off her debts and meet her partner's growing demands. What had started as an escape to a new life turned into an endless fight for survival. Her once self-assured face now looked worn out, and the sparkle in her eyes had vanished. As for Cameron, he continued to lose everything that had once mattered to him. His career, which had once seemed so promising, ended in complete ruin. Mistakes made in the wake of his personal turmoil led to his demotion. Colleagues who had once admired his skills now avoided him, seeing him as a source of problems. At a board meeting, it was decided that Cameron was no longer a valuable asset to the company. He found himself in a position where his presence was merely a shadow of his former success. Not long after his demotion, he received a notice of termination. When I learned about all of this, I felt neither joy nor pity. It was simply observing the inevitable. Their betrayal had led them to where they were now. Cameron had lost his career, respect, and even Lauren, the person for whom he had destroyed everything. As for Lauren, she had lost her illusions of an easy life, drowning in debt and despair. This situation gave me a sense of closure. Their downfall became a kind of lesson for me, a reminder of how fate finds ways to restore balance. I felt a sense of peace and was finally ready to leave them behind, along with the shadows of their actions that had haunted me for years. My energy and confidence began to return. I focused on my career, embracing new challenges that might have intimidated me in the past. Colleagues who had witnessed my journey through all the difficulties began to treat me with even greater respect. I received particular support from Grace and a few other coworkers who understood just how tough the road had been for me. Their help and kind words gave me the strength to move on completely. At last, I felt free. My past no longer held power over me. I was now able to build my future on my own terms, and nothing could stop me. The promotion I received wasn't just a recognition of my hard work, it was a symbol of a new chapter in my life. It was a confirmation that, despite all the challenges I had faced, I had proven my worth and professionalism. From that moment on, I decided to focus on becoming the best version of myself, both in my career and in my personal life. I started by reconnecting with old friends who had once been an important part of my life but had drifted away during the storms of the past. Their support proved to be more valuable than ever. Together, we reminisced about old times, laughed at past stories, and made plans for the future. Encouraged by this, I also decided to expand my social circle. I joined a local community group dedicated to charity work, helping those in need in our area. Volunteering became a source of joy for me, reminding me of the profound importance of kindness and how much it means to others. These gatherings not only introduced me to new people but also gave me a deep sense of purpose. Connecting with people from all walks of life, playing a part in their stories, and offering simple acts of assistance filled my life with warmth and new colors. I also began dedicating more time to myself. During my marriage, I often neglected my own passions, treating them as secondary. Now, I enthusiastically returned to painting, which had always been my greatest love. Every line on paper, every stroke of the brush became a way for me to express my emotions, release inner pain, and find healing. Before long, my work began to attract attention, and I even participated in a small local art exhibit. It was an incredible experience to see how my effort and emotions resonated with others. Step by step, I became ready to open my heart to new feelings. I started going on dates, meeting people who, like me, were searching for warmth and understanding. At first, it was difficult. Trust felt fragile and unattainable, but over time, I realized that not everyone was like Cameron and Lauren. Among my new acquaintances were kind, honest, and genuine individuals. Every conversation, every date taught me the importance of allowing myself to believe in the good again. Gradually, I came to understand that I deserved happiness, that I was strong and capable of building a life where I could truly be happy. As time passed, the pain of the past faded. It was replaced by joy from new experiences and the satisfaction of personal growth. Cameron and Lauren became distant memories, reminders of the importance of learning from mistakes but no longer sources of pain. From the occasional rumors I heard, their lives remained difficult. Cameron had never been able to rebuild his career. His name, once associated with success, now evoked only pity. He moved from one low-paying job to another, struggling to maintain a semblance of dignity. Lauren, on the other hand, was trapped in financial struggles. Her new partner turned out to be a constant source of debt, dragging her further down. She worked 2, sometimes 3 jobs just to make ends meet. The face I once remembered glowing with self-confidence now looked weary and drained. These updates brought me no joy. Instead, they served as reminders that honesty and kindness are far more important than the fleeting satisfaction of deceit. Betrayal always returns like a boomerang, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. I decided that my life would no longer be burdened by the shadows of the past. I would live with honesty, compassion, and respect for myself and those around me. Most importantly, I realized that true happiness comes from within, from the ability to love myself, my loved ones, and the world around me. Each day became an opportunity to create a new, brighter future. My heart, once broken, was now filled with joy and peace. I had found the happiness I had been searching for all my life.